Alright, now comes the fun part. As you know, in the base game, as your soldiers gain XP, they can specialize in certain classes. These classes exist to fulfill certain roles on the battlefield, such as Gunner, which guns, Sniper, who snipes, and Rocketeer that exists to be amputated to be turned into something useful. These roles on the battlefield depend not only on their class, but also on their ability layout, guns, armor, time of day, position of the moon, your zodiac sign, yada yada yada. By combining these classes, you can take down the Xeno scum in a variety of ways, like Assault likes to assault up close and personal. Sniper takes down the target 2 times over with a gun that sounds like God slamming his car door, and Rocketeer misses a goddamn rocket from 10 meters over and do as much damage as a gentle breeze and be a general drain on the society. This game, of course, is not satisfied with just giving stats, abilities, and equipment to your troops. You can also specialize them further, and if you don't know what you're doing, completely gimp yourself from making any progress. The way you can improve or screw yourself over further is by picking psionic, aka spoon bending, which is almost useless until way later. Genetic mods, which are pretty cool, and officers. The way you screw yourself over is by picking the wrong combination of abilities, classes, and these extra abilities. You can only pick one of these three, unless you have the Super Soldier second wave option enabled, which you should because it's really cool to roleplay Grey Knights going against Xenos. The way I will be covering these classes is by going over the classes themselves, the recommended builds, loadout, and specialization. I'm not covering all of them, just what I picked that has worked so far. Even that is long, and if I covered all of them, we would be here all day. There are a ton of combinations, and a lot of them are valid, but usually you will find that it was not very good, and you have lost a lot of resources on that one. In other words, here are my builds. I don't care what cheesy 6 assault nonsense you have. I've paid for the whole roster. I'll use the whole roster, at least the parts that I like. The way I like to set up my teams is 2 tanks, 2 middle range DPS with always 1 gunner, 1 infantry, 2 long range, and 2 supports. You can't get any more balanced than that. This way, I can always finagle my way out of almost any nonsense. First, we got the most obvious, Sniper. On the screen, you can see my recommended build. This is the guy that is the answer to how in the hell do we deal with that giant alien that is about to wipe us off on the next turn. Sniper gets double tap early on, so you will want to position them somewhere behind the front lines, preferably up high, and let him just take care of your problems one by one. If the enemy is overwhelming you, this is the class to get your team out alive. All you gotta do is just hunker down with your front lines and let the sniper clean out the big threats. He needs line of sight, and later on it is best to equip him with jetpacks. This way you can do a few things. Gain elevation advantage, gain better sight over the field, get some nice fresh air, and most importantly, use your officer abilities to give extra actions to your teammates and get yourself out of sticky situations. Since you can only give extra action to someone in sight, snipers make great officers. They're squishy and very terrain dependent, so you got to think before you assault some tight quarters. Snipers start out okay, then later become absolute angels of death towards the late game. Next we got a new class, Scout. At first you would think, why in the hell would I need someone to scout in the age of drones, satellites, scanners? Well, this is the guy throwing the drone, or in this case, a scanner grenade. You get it on level 1 and about 3 of them to boot. My favorite ability of Scout is Basic Hearing, which humans are supposedly capable of. It basically tells you the direction of the enemy pods, and if you're close, the amount and the type of aliens from a speech bubble. If you play your cards right, you can take at least one of them out before you're even spotted. Scout abilities scale very well with strike rifles. Sure, Scout will not do that much damage compared to Sniper, unless they flank the enemy, which they often can. But the way I like to use these guys is to detect the enemy, throw a scanner, then run back to my lines. Thanks to the Scout abilities, all 3 of these can be done in a single turn. Later on, they unlock the ability to go invisible when in full cover, which is very finicky, but when you get used to it, you never leave home without it. Scanners make the scanned aliens easier to hit with every shot. Not to mention, they disable the Seeker's ability to go invisible. So that way, you do not have to waste half of your HP to reveal them, thus turning them from a major threat to just target practice. Scout starts as an inferior sniper with some cool utility, and later becomes ears, eyes, and the pinky finger of your team. With the build on the screen, you specialize in emptying your entire magazine in a single turn quite often. Now from long range, we go to our supports. Medic. This is probably the most commonly misspecialized class. There are a few ways you can play Medic, and a lot of them are very good. You can focus on support grenades, and while they're up, you feel pretty good. But as soon as you run out, well, you now have a quasi-dead weight in the team. The way I specialize with the Medic is the Sentinel build. Medic comes in, heals the target for free action, and then overwatches in a way that even the quietest alien fart will get him to shoot the snot off of a muton. Idea being, if the enemy cannot hurt you, then there's nothing to heal. Not a bad idea. They start off as a rookie that can heal, then later become defensive infantry with healing. In the base game, I beat the game without using a medic, but that is not very realistic here because of all the surprises you might have to deal with. Now, I rarely leave home without a medic. Engineer. You would think this is pretty much medic with a toolkit instead of a medkit, but actually, no. Engineer certainly can fix mechs and SHIVs, but he has a bit of a different toolkit. What Engineer does quite well is marking targets with holo targeting. Sure, he cannot do double overwatch with somersault like medic, but what he can do is mark 2 targets in a single turn, letting your more competent troops to hit your targets easier and for more damage. Sure, you can also specialize them in grenades, but the problem with that is you can easily run out of those on a long mission. Instead, I make my engineers grenadier supports with late game Packmaster. That way, I got enough repairs for my mechanized tanks to run very long missions, provide fire support, and grenades for sticky situations. They start out bad and continue to be bad and later become tolerable, but they're the most efficient way of healing your tanks, so I can't really complain. Now we'll be talking about medium range. This is where suppression and killing power comes into play. We got 2 classes to do the trick. Anything else I found to be very suboptimal. There are probably some mech builds that may be good, but I ain't got time or the money for that. So I will tell you what works instead. Gunner. This is the heavy weapons class, and this is their weapon. It fires $2,000 custom cartridges at 10,000 rounds per minute. It costs 1 action and most of the enemy health. To fire this weapon for 6 seconds. The LAW variant may seem less accurate, but the fact that it can suppress multiple aliens in a single suppressive fire makes this weapon and class disable an elite alien and his few butt buddies every 2 turns. With Mayhem Suppression, you can do a bit of damage, but if and when the enemy does decide to retaliate, the damage they will take make them wish they never did. You can expect them to be better at straight-up firing, but for that you have better options. Instead, you get 1 turn if you have enemies left, post-suppression, where you can fire normally. The big drawback of these guys, they're slower than a slug, especially when under the effects of overpower. You will notice that when you can move only 2 to 3 spaces per turn. The only way to mitigate this is setting the pace of your advancement based on your gunner's positioning. Generally, I like to suppress for 1 turn and reposition, but this part is up to you. Always bring one to deal with leaders of a pod, because if those things are allowed to fire unimpeded, you will have a bad time. Infantry. And the dumbest name for a class award goes to the infantry, because almost all of our soldiers are infantry. So this makes absolutely no sense. That was one of the reasons why I avoided this class for a while. But after I had these guys piling up in the barracks, I decided to try them out. And oh god. When these guys are fully equipped, sure, they might seem vanilla, but there's nothing vanilla about 3 shots a turn average with massive damage increase, 20% free action chance, and 1 action reloads. The only thing stopping this guy from just soloing the entire alien army is ammo. This is your middle range damage dealer. Sadly, that's it. Sure, they can take a few hits, but outside of being a dedicated DPS class, they're not really good at anything else later on. They can get critical system targeting, which allows them to turn sectopods into canned alien food. They start kind of boring, but later are great at inflicting consistent damage on the enemy, with damage easily matching Assault and Sniper while having a mediocre defense. This class benefits the most from the Super Soldier option because there are good things affecting these guys on both psionics and genetic engineering. Finally, we talk about our up-close and personals, the tanks. The reason tanks prefer to be up-close is not only because they suck at aiming, but this way aliens are much more likely to fire at them and miss, or do so little damage you might as well just ignore it. You will not be able to crowd control everyone, and over time the damage will add up, which is why tanking, crowd control, and healing is important throughout your campaign. First, we got the classic, Assault. Assault is the Jotaro Kujo of the classes. They hit close range, they hit hard and fast, but most importantly, they can take a beating. Positioning, however, is the most important because when you make a mistake in positioning, it is your assault that ends up paying the price. And when they're flanked, their damage reduction is not going to help them. They're armed with a shotgun and prefer to go up close range. Their progression and abilities supports this. You can also use them with SMGs and other middle range weapons, but even in middle range the shotguns tend to do good work. They're also great at capturing aliens thanks to their mobility. Their damage is great because when you reach point-blank range, you have almost guaranteed chance to crit, unless the target is immune to crits. With the increased critical damage, close quarters, free fire, and rapid fire abilities mean consistent 3 crits in 1 turn with increased damage. It can turn almost anything from Mount Rushmore into Grand Canyon in a span of 2 seconds. Now, you may be thinking, Ark, you handsome war criminal, if Assault is the tanking class, and you implied they are one of the top damage dealers, then why should I not just take 8 assaults to the mission and just pew-pew my way to victory? Simple. Because for all of their mobility, potential damage, and tankiness, they do not have a way of controlling large groups. So the rest of the team helps set up the alien position, and Assault runs in close, rapid fires the biggest target in the face from point-blank range, and you all go home alive. When you cannot control the positioning of the enemy, you can take down a few, but from long range you will quickly get counterflanked and overwatched to death, so Assault is a flashy tool that only works well when the other tools are doing their job. Now comes my favorite, Goliath. You may have not noticed a distinct lack of mechs in this guy, and you would be right. The reason for that is they're either situationally effective or just pale in comparison to the awesome tankiness of Goliath. Goliath does a few things that sets them apart, and it capitalizes on all of the advantages of the mech. Mechs cannot benefit from cover, but they can become cover. When they do become cover, they become easy to hit, but they take so little damage that it might as well be in cover. So, mech is a tank in the most traditional sense. If Assault is your D&D's fighter tank, then Goliath is a Goliath barbarian tank. Goliath is also a great way of using the useless Rocketeers, and turn them into a core part of your team. Oh, and the enemy is not firing at you for some reason? No problem. Light them up, fire once, and then back into providing cover on the same turn. Tough enemy? Run up close and show them the power of the machine god by punching them with a big old fist. Oh, they decide to fire again. No problem. Reactive targeting sensors allow you to retaliate and go into cover mode as a response to the damage, which is absolutely busted. Not to mention, Goliaths have the best health and overall defensive stats, so there is no need for any other mech. Why not bring 8 of these guys? Well, these guys are probably the most expensive type of soldier you can have. Not only do you need to rank up with the other class to qualify for the surgery, you need lots of meld and actually make the armor and weapons, which are much more expensive compared to your other soldiers. So to even be able to field one of these consistently in your teams is going to be a challenge. Lastly comes the honorable mention, SHIV. SHIVs are very useful in this mod. Not only can you equip them to have signature abilities from almost any other class, letting them pretend to be in another class and fulfill that role, they're relatively fast and very tanky. Meaning you can literally run up behind an alien and rip them to shreds one by one. This strategy, however, tends to fall apart later on when you're facing aliens with critical systems targeting. With an early build I have for you on the screen, you can use the SHIVs to suppress and move, which allows you to control the battlefield better and push the lines. And in the late game, Illyrium turbos allow you to either escape the ethereal range or go full Tokyo drift behind the enemy lines in a single turn. Almost all builds for SHIV are valid. And remember, you can sell the chassis when the SHIV dies to recoup some of the construction costs if you lose them. Unlike the base game, SHIVs are no longer a waste of XP, because they split the XP they earn with the rest of the team evenly. So bring them when you can. They never tire, but at some points they're not as good as an organic soldier. As a side note, do not bring 2 of these to the field. Your pilot is controlling the SHIV and can only command 1 per turn unless you have an option selected. Even then you will find that it's not a good idea. With the builds I provide, you can outplay your enemy because you will have answers to everything. Finally, let's talk about the secondary upgrades. Psionics, gene modifications, and officership. I have provided my suggested builds in the sections talking about the classes. I would also suggest to have the second wave option to allow both psionics and gene mods because on their own, these are quite weak and it's hard to even see the difference. The gene modifications work great for infantry and gunners. That is because with this build they rely heavily on Overwatch. This also applies to medic. The most notable one here is the eyes modification that removes the aim penalty from Overwatch shots. Psionics start out kind of underwhelming, however later you unlock the ability of using your psi abilities with one action, which now makes those much more effective. Later in the game you'll always want to pick Psi Panic and bring a few psionics along. That is because berserkers are weak to Psi Panic and can catch you off guard, resulting in a team wipe. Officers, however, are very clear to me. I make my snipers the officers and bring them to every mission, because they benefit the least from gene mods and psionics. All the while, when they get jetpacks, they can have vision over the whole team, and provide free action to any member you need. You always want an officer in the team because of the XP boost, the chance for free actions, and also the inherent passive bonuses that they provide. Free action usually is just nice to have, but can be a lifesaver in the right situation. So, now that you understand your soldiers and how to gear them, let's talk more in depth about the threat that we face.